Thank you for joining us for this Idaho Environmental Forum short. I'm Jen Schneider, an IEF board member. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jared Talley, an expert in public lands and collaborative governance, and we will be talking about some of his work as an Idaho Science and Technology Policy Fellow and as a facilitator for collaborative work being done on rangelands in the West. Idaho Environmental Forum is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational association whose sole mission is to promote serious, cordial, and productive discourse on a broad range of environmental policies affecting Idaho. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our 2022 sponsors for making discussions like this possible. You can find them on our website at idahoenvironmentalforum, all one word, .org. So Jared, I do want to, you and I talked a little bit beforehand about you not wanting me to read your full bio for this to be very conversational, but I do want to read just a little bit of your bio because I think that the work you do is so fascinating. And then I'm going to ask you about it. So here we go. Dr. Jared Talley was born and raised in southwestern Idaho and is deeply connected to Idaho's desert communities. He earned his doctorate in the philosophy of environmental governance from Michigan State University and his master's in environmental policy and natural resource management from Boise State University. Currently, Jared works at Boise State University in the environmental studies programs and in other programs in the School of Public Service too. And you're also part of the second cohort of fellows chosen as part of the Idaho Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. You have been placed both with the Office of Species Conservation and the STEM Action Center. So I think where I want us to start off is to have you tell us a little bit about your work as one of these fellows. This is a new program in Idaho and you're in 2 offices. So just help us understand a little bit about the work that you're doing there.
Yeah, that's a good question because I ask myself that a lot. There's a lot of work being done and sometimes it feels like nothing's being done, right? There's just, because there's so much. The work I do with the STEM Action Center is specifically focused on getting STEM into rural communities. A lot of the STEM jobs that we're predicting in the next couple decades revolve around engineering and especially computer and data science. But it turns out that, rural communities have a real need to keep kids in those communities, and these jobs may not exist in those communities. So the resources for STEM outreach misalign with the needs of rural communities. And so I'm helping set up programming that focuses on the needs for food processing, agricultural technology, and environmental conservation, those jobs that actually do exist in those communities, so kids can go get their STEM educations, come back and land in these high-paying, stable, and presumably much more proliferous jobs here in the coming decades. But that helps keep those communities rolling as we see, land shifts and stuff like that. On the other side, with the Office of Species Conservation, when I started as the fellow, they asked me what I wanted to work on. And I do a lot of work in rangeland, and the Office of Species Conservation does as well regarding sage grouse. And they said, well, that would be a natural fit. And I told them, well, I want to do something new that I can learn from. And so I've been spending a lot of time learning about salmon issues here in Idaho. And right now I'm designing a survey that we're going to run statewide to kind of get some idea about how Idaho citizens want to see salmon policy play out in the near future. And other than that, it's just been a lot of learning, right? That's what I do most day in and day out, just learn.
But that's the exciting part about that fellowship, I feel like, is you get in these new environments and you're learning about these new topics and trying to work at that science policy interface is really challenging sometimes. Yeah,
there's a lot of reflection there. Thinking, what's my role coming from a university, coming into here? I don't want to be unreflective about that because I think that might be part of the issues we're seeing about some of the challenges that we see in using science for policy is, being unreflective about what we're doing coming from the university into a policy space. So there's been a lot of that, a lot of self-reflection.
Well, let's dig into that a little further, because in addition to wearing this, fellowship hat, and then you also teach at the university, and you'll teach full-time starting next fall, and you do research across a wide variety of areas, but including in collaborative governance and in environmental governance. And then on top of that, you're also doing this very hands-on, on-the-ground facilitation work in collaborative governance with rangelands. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of collaborative governance. I think that's a phrase that people use a lot. It gets thrown around a lot. How do you think about it in the context of rangelands in particular?
Yeah, and I vacillate. Sometimes I think about it really simply, like, oh, it's just working together, right? We just have to work together. And sometimes I think about it in ways that may be too complex and make it seem like it can't ever work. And part of that is, as you said, the different hats I wear, the different perspective I bring to them. When I'm in the community, working with the community, trying to work on an issue in collaborative space, I'm much more optimistic, and collaboration there to me means not only working together, but recognizing the obstacles that are preventing us from working together. And sometimes those obstacles are small little, policy verbiages that we can't figure out a way to work around. Sometimes they're interpersonal. Sometimes they're just, we need a piece of information that we just don't have and we need to go find it, something like that. But on the other side, when I'm in my research hat, I'm thinking deeply about what collaboration looks like. And for me, collaboration maybe is a misnomer. Oftentimes I see it happening more as coalition. And I think that is a really minor change in the language, but it's pretty powerful to think about that. Collaboration, and actually, if you watch a lot of videos or track the collaborative space, you'll hear this word all the time: trust. We need more trust. We need more trust. And trust plays a different role in collaboration than it does in coalition. You still need trust, but coalition is working together, even though maybe you don't agree with each other for a common purpose, where collaboration is agreeing for that common purpose. And so I kind of wear these different hats that changes my perspective on it. In the end, what I think it really means to me is that the stuff that the social decisions that get made, whether they be politically, whether they be in policy and rules and regulations, or whether they just be norms or even media rhetoric, I think the ramifications of those decisions that get borne by small communities that don't have a voice in those decisions, I think collaboration is a way to amplify voice for whatever purpose that is.
So let's bring this down to earth and talk about it in a really practical sense. Can you maybe give us an example of a project you've worked on in the rangelands that demonstrates collaboration or coalition, and some of the either successes or challenges that you faced in doing that kind of work?
Yeah, there's a group I've been involved with for now close to 7 or 8 years, and the collaborative space has shifted throughout that time, depending on what we're looking at. It's the Schussel Resource Management Group in Northern Nevada in Elko County. And the most recent iteration of this has been trying to get a cooperative monitoring agreement on the ground for the ranch to be able to collect some data so that they can experiment with different grazing styles and see how that's impacting the environment. But of course, this ranch is a very complex case because they have Forest Service and BLM allotments on it, and of course their private land. And all 3 of those have different management norms and different policies and regulations that dictate that. And so we're having to pull together both federal agencies, plus we're pulling together from UNR, University of Nevada, Reno Extension, and then the ranch and the community themselves, and then as well some nonprofits to work through this. And it's exceedingly complex when you get all these different, I don't even want to call them interests, but I would just say different jobs at the table. We all have different jobs that that require of us different things. And it's been really challenging having that diversity. But because of the years of work we had done before in different contexts, we had built some of those relationships. It's going much better than some other ones. For instance, there's a group I work with that's being sponsored by the Western Landowners Alliance in Montana. It's the Conflict Reduction Consortium, thinking through about predators, wolves and grizzly bears, and livestock conflicts. And that collaboration got off to a rocky start because it was written into a grant by a university that they were going to collaborate. And they didn't think about it soon enough. They didn't think about the real obstacles, nor did they put boots on the ground and start building relationships. And when they came in, it was too late and things are not going well. And so in that role, I'm actually more of a maybe dispute resolution than I am a facilitator of productive dialogue. But all of these are instances of collaboration, I think, and they're just at different stages of productivity, I guess I might want to say, or effectiveness. And I don't think that's a linear model either. I don't think that all collaborations can be found on, from the one side to the other on this gradient. I think there's just a lot of different flavors of collaboration, and these are different flavors of collaboration.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about process and some of the challenges that can come up when we're trying to facilitate these sorts of public engagement or stakeholder engagement or facilitation exercises. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the other challenges that you maybe see on the horizon as somebody who comes into spaces where there's already existing conflict, or where you have to build sort of a coalition or help others build a coalition together.
I actually don't think there's much of, honestly, a challenge in getting people together. In my experience in the West, both having grown up here, but also in this work, people are really, really willing to come together to work on the issues that they see. I think the challenges I'm seeing in my work and experience are really complex but simple, like federal government turnover. The way that we lose institutional knowledge because we can't keep people on the ground. And I've heard it being talked about in many different ways. Sometimes these small communities, people just don't want to live in. And so they come into the community, they realize, this is not the place for me, so they leave. Sometimes I've heard it said that there's incentive, the federal government might incentivize being moved around so they're not captured by local interests. I don't know what the actual issue is, but this sort of turnover has been, at least in the West, I think the major obstacle. And I hear it consistently across the board in the work that I do in Montana and the work I do in Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and I work all over. It's the same story. It's the exact same story. And what that really does, it's not about the turnover itself. That would only help. But I think there's this fear of failure that is limiting us from the experimentation that we need. That collaboration needs to exist. They need to be able to come up with creative solutions, figure out a way to monitor that solution, go put it on the ground and see if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, we should be okay with that. That way we know what to do next time. And so do something different, do something different. But we have this big fear of failure about different land management techniques that is really hindering us. And that institutional knowledge is a part of it. So when you have someone that is representing the BLM, let's say, and on public lands, that has worked with the group for a long time, that they trust that the group actually does want to help and they're part of the experimentation process, and they have that institutional knowledge, they have a history of it, they're much more open to finding ways to allow novel and innovative kind of ways to solve the problems than people that are new to the job, that are trying to stay within the sideboards of the job itself. So I guess it's two-pronged. There's institutional factors, but then also this fear of failure that's preventing robust experimentation in these groups.
Is there anything that comes up for you, maybe just in terms of closing thoughts, that where you wish you sort of, there's something that you wish people understood better about collaborative governance, like the one thing that you hear over and over again that you sort of a misconception you have to correct, or a pattern of thought that you're like, no, that's not quite the right way to think about it?
I maybe I'd leave it off with not about collaborative governance specifically, although I do think this absolutely overlays with collaboration, is that the groups that I work with, and they're from ranch groups and ranch communities, they're land conservation, they're species conservation, hunting groups and angling groups and recreation groups, that this is where the arguments arise. That in my eyes, as I look through and work with all these groups, we all have common purpose, that everyone wants the land to be healthy so that they can experience the land in the way that they would like to. And I think that that there's absolute ways, and we have examples across the West of where this has worked out. The Owyhee initiative, I think, is a wonderful, I wasn't part of that, but if you look at that, it's a wonderful example of how we can actually all work together to help what we all care about in ways that doesn't pit us against each other. And we're just hurting ourselves by using our resources to fight each other, instead of all pooling our resources and our talents and our experience to work together to make the West what we want it to be, I guess, is a way to put that. Maybe I shouldn't say what we want it to be, but to help the West however it needs.
It's funny that sounds almost like a radical idea right now, right? This idea that we can come together, but it's also so heartening to know that work is happening and that it's having these positive outcomes and that relationships are being built.
Absolutely.
Jared, I want to thank you so much for talking with us today. This has been fantastic. I also want to thank our IEF members for joining us for this forum short. If you have an idea for a forum short or a forum event, we'd love to hear it. Just email us at ief@idahoenvironmentalforum.org. And another shout out to our 2022 sponsors. We couldn't do any of this without you. If you'd like to join our group of generous supporters, please reach out to us.